Hello, this is Errol at home, and today I'm going to show you how I make sealing wax. This is not intended for food use, such as waxing cheeses, but for sealing letters. The color of the sealing wax you end up with depends on the wax you start with, the color of the resin, and any colorants you add. For this sealing wax, I'm using the yellow cappings wax. I color the sealing wax with candle dyes, and these can come in liquid form or solid tablets of 2 squares. I add the dyes to the weighed wax and melt them together in a silicone tray in the oven at about 100 degrees Celsius. I've tried melting the resin directly into the wax, and although I've seen a recipe where that should work, for me the resin doesn't want to disperse and remains a sticky, gummy blob within the molten wax. Perhaps with a different type of resin it may disperse more easily, but pine resin is what I have. So now I dissolve the resin in an equal weight of isopropyl alcohol. The smaller the pieces of resin, the faster they dissolve, so it's worth putting them into a plastic bag and breaking the pieces up with a hammer. I cover it with a silicone muffin cup to prevent the alcohol from evaporating and set it on top of the stove while the wax is melting. This warms it up and makes the resin dissolve faster. For these 2 colors, I've used 1 square of solid red dye or 50 drops of liquid red dye to 1 kilo of wax, and 1 square of sunflower yellow dye to 1.5 kilos of yellow wax. The reason I added yellow dye is that over time sunlight will bleach the yellow pollen in the wax to a pale beige, and I wanted it to remain yellow. Warming up the resin alcohol solution helps to prevent the temperature of the wax from dropping too much when it's added together. I put it back into the oven until it no longer smells of alcohol, and then take it out and allow it to set. To make it easier to use, I divided it up and melted it into smaller molds. I used exactly the same process to make green and black sealing wax. The green wax has 1 square of forest green dye to 1 kilo of wax, and the black has 1 square of black dye to 100 grams of wax. I much prefer using silicone containers for melting beeswax because once it's set it comes away very easily. Here's how the 4 colors came out. This is one way of me to fold and seal a letter. This recipe gives sealing wax that is soft enough to mold by hand, in summer at least. I put the seal into the freezer for a minute before using it to set the wax faster and prevent it from sticking to the seal. Alternatively, you can rest the seal on an ice cube on a damp cloth or wipe the surface of the seal with a little oil. Choose a drying oil like grapeseed oil. These will all help to prevent it from sticking to the wax. Instead of warming the wax by hand, you can also use a seal forge. After melting, the wax has to be left for a few minutes to cool down a little and become more viscous, or it can be too runny. Some of the wax ran onto the paper here. I also noticed if the wax is remelted too many times, the resin starts to separate out again. So while the seal forge is more fun to use, you'll probably be able to reuse the sealing wax more often if you hand warm it.